This is the 8-9 combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones, and this is the Weekend Post-Mortem. Hello, mate. How you doing?
How's it, man? There's a lot to like about our sport right now. I think anyone who's shit talking rugby would have a hard time continuing to be so dour and negative if they were watching these semifinals from the Champions Cup and also the Challenge Cup. Mate, all rounds. I gotta say, I'm not sure I remember enjoying one particular game that wasn't a test match as much, unless it was involving my baby Stormers winning something. But the Saints going toe to toe with Leinster, with all those ebbs and flows and subplots and dramas and melodramas and hushed conversations in French between a TMO and a ref, it was just delicious. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a great weekend of European semi-finals. It's a big edition of the Weekend Post-Mortem. We'll pull out all the big results from the games that grabbed us around leagues this weekend. Champions Cup semi-final upsets, Super Rugby Pacific table shake-ups, and we'll touch on League One in Japan and Major League Rugby in the States as well. It has been a really enjoyable weekend. You're right.
Well, part of it is when you have a player that's hyped, Henri Pollock. Pollock is not the bollocks. He might, sometimes do a few things that some of the old school blazer wearing elbow patch guys don't enjoy. But if you back it up, what's interesting is to watch how quickly a lot of those people changed over the weekend. Even Irish supporters going, well, to be fair,
To be fair,
the boy can play.
he can play. Yeah, exactly
And there
right.
was an old Afrikaner guy that I know kind of well, and he goes, that oak is trouble, eh? He looks like he could be trouble for a long time.
Yeah. Paul Williams, great journo and friend of the pod, sort of, said on Sunday. I saw it. He said, "Can you imagine Henry Pollock on dry tracks in Australia?" To which straight away a few of us jumped on that and just said, "Well, it's time to order the sprinklers, then, isn't it?" I said, "Or we just play games in Brisbane all the time."
Yeah, and one of our great friends of the pod, Charlie Morgan's been talking up young Henry for a while
He
now.
has.
And
He's
one of
been
the things
telling us
he's
about him.
actually been pointing out is not just the quality of the play, and he did a great piece about the sort of decathlete skills of Pollock and the ability at that size to get to the corner around Sam Prendergast, who's not slow,
No.
and make him look silly, but also that the idea of the big talking, swag, striding kind of guy is maybe what English rugby needs.
Yep.
Is maybe it's kind of been in the doldrums for a while because they haven't had that sort of, almost love to hate him kind of guy.
And it actually feels like Northampton's back half of the season has really kicked on as his game has stepped up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say he's carried Northampton, but his form has definitely dragged them along. So, yeah.
And what I did before the match was I looked at sort of the composite thing people do, which is obviously a terrible way to analyze rugby because it's the distance between, if you pick the composite side, but all the positions were really close, but you had two or three that were massive differences, it would change, just like an Artie Savea type quotient.
Yeah.
But I didn't really pick only on Henry, but I said there were five positions at which the Saints actually were better than Leinster, even though Leinster had the other 18 covered.
Yeah.
And the question was, could the Saints concoct a shape of a rugby match where it was more about those Tommy Freeman, Finn Smith, Henry Pollock? Was that possible? And it turned out that yes, it was. I mean, it was just enough. Let's be fair to Leinster. It was just enough. It was not. Yeah. But they for the first 40 for sure, the Saints were able to concoct this very weird brand of rugby where they didn't get in the right spots. They played 36% territory, 42% possession, but every time they were in the striking zone, they made it pay.
Yeah, they certainly did. We'll get through the scores in just a second. Before we do that, though, tell the nice people why we would really love them to subscribe to that No Combo and why now we cannot believe, after begging for your help to get to 5,000, we are now well north of 6,000 subscribers. We cannot believe the way the numbers have gone up in the last 5 days.
Yeah, so, I mean, people you do love. So now we know that you love us. So that's good. But now, the thing about love is it's you always want more. Nothing's ever enough. So I've got the serums now, I've got the moisturizers, I've got the cleansers, I've got all the regimen for the skin products to make us visual. But now I want everyone to just think about sending Brett all over Australia for the Lions, into small hamlets, researching the birthplace of guys like Nick Dolly
Yeah,
and Harry Potter, and doing
yeah.
interesting backstories. Just guys, send Brett all over the giant country of Australia.
There you go. There you go. Okay, that's
Subscribe.
that could be fun. That could be fun. If you are watching us on the 89 YouTube channel, as we've been saying for a long time now, just hit that little red subscribe button down there in the bottom corner. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Pods, any of the podcast platforms, whatever it happens to be, then hit subscribe, hit follow, hit like, whatever it might be that you need to, and you won't miss a moment. Two very, very, very good Champions Cup semi-finals has resulted in the final being decided. Northampton Saints will take on Bordeaux at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff there on May 24. Northampton were, well, they were good enough, weren't they, to hold out Leinster at the Aviva 37-34 after a dominant first half. And then Bordeaux similarly were just too good for Toulouse in the end, 35-18, despite having to defend twice as much. Maybe that's even underselling how much they had to do it. Let's touch on the French final first.
Yeah, shape of game. So we're not going to get the rematch of Leinster versus Toulouse that everyone sort of thought they might get. Now we're getting the box office boys. We're getting the high attack octane from the Saints up against this incredible machine. Hopefully, Damien Penaud miraculously can come back. It didn't look like it. It looked like he was
Didn't look
pretty
great, did it?
badly hurt when they were walking off
And
the pitch, and you have the players talking to players. There were several guys who know Damien well enough that you could sort of see the body language, and he was shaking
he
his
was
head.
clearly emotional when he was talking to teammates and opposition players. Yeah.
So the similarities between these semifinals are interesting enough that I'll kind of bridge those, but there were some that were not. And one thing is, I know for sure that Toulouse was not entering this match with Bordeaux with quite the same confidence, maybe overconfidence that Leinster was. Their tie with Saints, famously, I'm not accusing the social media of Leinster of anything, but they were the only one of the 8 teams that seemed to really push this idea of buying tickets to Cardiff. And there was this also idea of picking, Cian Healy and not having Jordy Barrett on the. It didn't seem like the French derby had those aspects.
Yeah.
It was clear that Toulouse had lost more of their frontline players than Bordeaux. It was clear that playing in Bordeaux would matter. It was clear that that the top 14 league contests have been give and take between these two teams. So it was sort of parity. But like you say, what you point out perfectly well is that in both cases, the winning team tackled more, defended more, was more on their own half, was in their own red zone, defending red zone attacks more.
Yeah.
Didn't have as many flashy offloads, didn't throw as many passes, and didn't have as many carries, but seemed to, when it mattered, whether it was Pete Samu finding a backflip to a flying Louis Bielberry, these incisive moments happened for Bordeaux. And it just seemed like you kept thinking, well, Antoine Dupont, if he was on the field right now, might have found a few of those more.
Yes.
Yeah.
And instead it was this guy, wasn't it? It was Maxime Lucu who was front and center in everything that Bordeaux did that was great. And I mean, Pete Samu had a storming game. Ben Tamifuna, we for full disclosure, Harry and I linked up and watched the second half again together, which is fantastic. Ben Tamifuna, we were a little bit we were ambivalent about him, but his impact off the bench actually can't be undersold, and he ended up scoring what was the decisive try at the end. So they were clinical in the end, Bordeaux, weren't they?
I mean, you could have 100 silverback gorillas try to tackle Ben Tamiafuna. If you kept the gorillas on side, if they had to play proper rugby union, I don't think they would stop that, because there's just a subterranean. It reminds me of some of those All Black hookers almost, where they just get so low There's just no possible legal way to stop that. So it's
No.
just a matter of getting into the right territory. There was a point in the match where it felt like, and I almost started feeling that way when your guy Luku banged over a 60-meter
Oh,
penalty goal. It just
wasn't
seemed
that an
from
incredible kick?
that point on, it just seemed like if they manage to lose from here, if they to lose, it
If
will
they
be a
managed to
choke.
lose.
It'll be a
Yeah.
collapse. And so
Yeah.
I think it was wonderful for Bordeaux and their long suffering fans and their incredible fans to show that they could take a match, get that little margin, and
Yeah.
then play in the right, was it right at the right part where they had 36% territory in the match as a whole. But in the final 5 minutes, where was the match played? In Ben Tamiafuna territory.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. If you only watch three, if you only remember three things, or only watch three things out of this game, I would suggest watch Luku's penalty kick. It's like best way I can describe it. It's a 58-meter 2-iron stinger. Like it wasn't real high, hit it low, but he hit it so flush, and the flight on it was a bit
It
wobbly, but
drew
got
and then it
it through.
faded at the end.
Drew
Yeah.
left, straight, and yeah. That kick was incredible. The Pete Samu flick pass probably won't be done justice in Louis Bielbarri's try, but Pete Samu gets a flick pass away that should just be bottled and framed and put on display permanently. It was just incredible. And then Tamifuna's try, Alan Alatoa has been having a lot of success this year, scoring pick and drive tries for the Brumbies, and he's doing exactly the same thing. He's picking the ball up. He's got to travel 60 centimeters, 2 feet at most, and he just goes for the ankles. He just goes real low, and you're right, you cannot stop that.
Yeah, Alatoa scores ear-bleeding tries. Tagliafuna has added some helmeting on his head with his additional hair. Listen, Pete Samu, I accuse him of being possibly not a complete forward. I think there's some back to him because he looks so comfortable diving while he was scoring with his shirt tucked in, but perfect form. The Olympic judges would have given him 10.0. And then in space, I mean, that vision around that little flick you just talked about, it made it look easy. It was not easy.
No, absolutely. And his ruck involvement, his defense was outstanding as well. Northampton were absolutely outstanding in beating Leinster at the Aviva in Dublin. It was certainly on the back of their first half. Where they scored their 4 tries in the first half, basically. What was it, 27-15 at halftime, and from
4
there,
tries,
there's no question that Leinster were going to come back. It was a matter of how long it would take Leinster to come back and how well Northampton could hold on. And credit to them, they're a completely different team to what started the season. Completely different, like a 180 degrees, but they are playing some really, really good rugby at the moment.
There's so many different angles to this, and it is the number one topic in rugby, of course, today is the Leinster defeat because so in a weird way, you have sort of 3 different angles. One is when you have a bad start like that, and the Ninaver defense has never given up 4 tries in a match as a whole, let alone the first half, and they were winning going away, so you had the clicking of both defense and attack working. So you have a match suddenly where the defense does not hold and you have 4 tries run in. There's a question there about coaching. So Leo Cullen, has he outlasted his ability to motivate players, to get them, like Sir Alex Ferguson talked a lot about matching moment and tapering and even having days off sometimes, or screaming at someone or making someone else feel good, and that sort of man management side. Has Leo got to the point now where we think of him as, since 2012, as a guy who can get you into these big matches but not drink the blood of your enemies, not have enough fire and ferocity, where he's just a good, gracious loser who can actually build a really good squad? But the problem is you've given him 900 test caps. You've given him, according to sources that Charlie Morgan has got, 17 million euro budget compared to, say, Munster's 5 million. Why not over the
And
top?
and to be clear, there by budgets we mean player salaries, not organisational budget.
And there's a lot of guesswork in there, so give it a grain of salt. But I think the ratio of 3-1 is probably about right. So when you do that, and to the Saints, I think it was 2-1. So when you do that and you keep butting up against that, whether it's in the grand final or semi-final, over and over and over and over, and you run into this idea that knockout rugby doesn't reward the team that, in this case, builds 154 carries to the Saints 102, but the Saints make 200 more meters in those carries.
Yeah.
You have 3-2 on the carry ratio, but the clean breaks, the defenders beaten are all Saints favor, and you have to throw 178 passes to 87. Something about that work of building rocks and throwing and the spilled ball and over and over, just the breakdown. You have to build about 100 rucks and the other team builds 50. It can be really debilitating in finals rugby because you just every little error, and then Tommy Freeman, damn him, is running away and celebrating. And so then you think, but we built 17 rucks in a row. Yeah, but the 18th ruck.
Yeah. The 18th ruck cost you.
Yeah,
and then they ran 40 meters and scored.
Yeah, and they scored in 1 second. Yeah, so
and that's the thing there. Yeah, Tommy Freeman had a hat trick before halftime, scored 2 tries in 2.5 minutes immediately before the break.
Who's the more fortunate boy here? They're both good looking, Tommy Freeman and Henry Pollock. They both got full of swag. Maybe Tommy's a little bit more understated, but he's celebrating like a maniac as well. They both young. They're both shoe-ins for England, but now they're also, I think, in the Lions conversation.
Probably going to get on the Lions tour in a few months.
It's not a bad time to be Tommy or Hank up there in Northampton.
I'm glad Henry Pollock wears head tape because it's difficult to pull them apart sometimes.
And then you have Finn Smith playing the bashful, humble. He's not even, he doesn't do any of that flashy stuff. But that man outplays Prendergast, or our friend Johan calls him Prendergap. Sorry, because he is the gap you look for. Johan, that was genius. By the way, you cannot blame this loss on Sam. When you fall off 37, 37 tackles were fallen off by Leinster. Okay, so Sam fell off 5. Yeah. Your number 10 is usually your worst tackler. That means 32 other tackles were fallen off by. Yeah,
they defended the backfield for a reason. Yeah,
and if you're pinning Sam on not getting to Henry on that sweep move where he used the referee as a beautiful obstacle, good luck. It looks like Henry's got serious wheels, and there's plenty of 10s who would not have got to him.
He's got an incredible turn of pace, hasn't he?
But Finn definitely outplayed him. So in the Lions stakes, when you look across that, I thought Josh van der Fleer actually had a really, really great game. But there were other guys that did raise their hand, and I think, for example, I thought Henry definitely played his way on the plane, unless Andy Farrell just doesn't care. But there were other guys, maybe even Dingwall, kind of posing a few questions. There were other guys in the Saints that I hadn't really looked at that closely, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to be in the conversation now. One thing is for sure: about 2 years ago, there were all these jokes about it's going to be the Irish Lions, and no one's saying that right now.
No, certainly not the case. There was a nice little Australian flavour to the Saints, wasn't there? So Josh Kemeny on the blind side was incredible. John Rahm at fullback had a really strong game. Scored a try. Yes, he did score a try in the second half,
and he deserved that.
He did.
I think you're calling him the golfer's name. I think he's James.
I am.
You turned him into the Spanish golfer.
Yeah, I am.
Listen, I thought Ram had a very good game.
Ram.
He did a lot of kick return, and a lot of those kick returns were the precursors to some of the other flashy things that happened, including tries.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I was happy for him. I think you're right. We were talking offline about how Kemeny, even though he had the yellow card, he did so many big physical things besides that I think it almost made. I think he was the better. But my question is between Samu and Kemeny, which is a really nice 1-to-1 there. Who do you think shaded it on the day of the best Aussies loose forward in the
best
semis?
Impact? Oh, it's a good question. It might be Pete Samu because he just stood out from that Bordeaux pack so much, whereas Kemeny was surrounded by some very, very good players in the
I think you're right,
the
and I think
Northampton pack.
so. I think Samu, piratical, dashing, swashbuckling Pete Samu, he did everything. He was a
He did
line out.
everything. Yeah,
He was a
whereas
line out jumper. He was.
yeah,
He. You're right about the cleaning. I mean, I remember him being decent at the ruck, picking his moments and so forth in Super Rugby and in Rugby Championship. But I don't know if I've seen him so violent. I mean, legally violent.
Yeah. Whereas Kemeny in the back row, obviously Pollock's doing his thing. Augustus was massive, like figuratively and literally.
South African view of this was that Augustus has played himself into a spot with Jasper Wiese out for neck surgery. Elrich Lowe still rehabbing a leg that will take him the full year. And so you have these two firebrands, Cameron Honeycomb, and then you have Evan Ruiz. But both of them have sort of holes in their game. And the idea of Augustus as a like-for-like Wiese type, which he's just a bulldozer.
He's a straight line goalpost to goalpost runner.
You know what I'm going to do. You know where I'm going.
You
it doesn't
get in the
matter.
way and stop me.
Yeah,
exactly. You mentioned Angus Scott Young had a really good impact off the bench as well, just to keep the
all year. Actually, for 2 seasons, I've been pointing out that Angus has been playing really well. People sometimes been scoffing at it. I would just say to people, watch these games. Don't rely on received wisdom or old wisdom when you say that Sean McMahon is the answer, instead of people who are currently actually playing at very high levels and winning. And there's something about winning. Yeah.
All I'm saying is that if you want to be selected to play rugby, you need to be playing rugby. All I'm saying.
Yeah.
You mentioned Josh van der Fleer there, which sort of leads us into the little crucial moment at the very end, the no try of Ross Burns. And we're looking at a still shot, a still image of it now. And this actually shows it better than the screenshot that I sent you as I watched it. It was ultimately pulled up for a knock on before it even got to the point of whether Ross Byrne could have played the ball when he was laying on the ground, whether he did. I think as it happens, he's grounded the ball, and that image shows it against the corner post as well. At the same time.
But the question is if he's allowed to even
whether
play.
he's a down to. Yeah. Then regardless, it never got that far. They ruled there'd been a knock on in the strip. There was a yellow card to the Northampton player. So my question to you is, when does a strip stop and a knock on start?
That's one of the most. That's actually one of the most difficult rulings to make, and I don't think that the TMO gives you much additional insight usually. So it's a ref decision, and it's a bang decision. Yep. It's really difficult to do. It's like a lot of sports. It's like strips in the NBA when you try to figure out whether the ball was from the defending player or the player going up for the layup. Yeah. And between you and me, it's 50-50, and you just have to make a decision.
You do.
So I think on that one, it's interesting because there was a subplot here, which is Leinster was doing tap and goes from 5, and they were working really well. And Josh was actually one of the key elements there, and they would do a shift. They would do a hooker feint, a Sheehan or Kelleher feint, and they would call off, and they would get one of their better passers, and Josh hit Caelan Doris on that first try. Perfect strike. The 9 would have been proud of.
Hit the seam of the defenders.
Even though that decision in the corner is getting a lot of play, even though I think actually when you actually sit down and think about it analytically, it's probably correct. Although it's almost like when I'm doing my fixing work in the real world, as you guys know, I encounter something where it's the CEO who's in a car crash, but he's got coke, but he's on the run, and he's got like you just keep having illegalities, and you're trying to figure out what's the worst one. Yeah. So when you started to look at that sequence, I go, I think everyone's doing something wrong, and I don't know who's the most wrong. Yeah. But I had sympathy for the French duo, and I kind of liked that they could speak in French to each other because it gave them cover. They're like, hey brother, what's going on, man?
Yeah. Just remember, there's 50,000 people watching this right here. How about we switch channels?
Yes. Let's just talk a little bit. Let's have some cup of tea. It was difficult. And so I think on a bigger justice call, Leinster still had plenty they could do. So it wasn't, to me, it wasn't the be all and end all. First of all, they had threes they could have taken a shot at in the final
Earlier.
stretch.
Yeah.
They could vary the tap and go. There were things they could have done. So the game was still on their foot. And
Yeah.
so when I look back, and I think this is fair, in Ireland, there's a lot of, circular firing squad going on right now. But I think it's fair to look at a lot of different facets and not just Sam can't tackle. Like, that's just
You
not.
can't, yeah.
Nah.
And likewise, you can't look at those last 4 or 5 minutes and conclude that decision in the corner was what cost.
No, it
game.
didn't.
That's
No,
not the way it worked. You posed the question to me as I was watching the game back. Should they have taken the 3? In hindsight, yes, and in knockout games, of course you should. But I still think they kind of did the right thing because they had been making so much ground. They had. I really think they had all the momentum of the game at that point. It felt like the right thing to do to try and push for the pick and drive try. Northampton defended so well in the back half of that game.
There were a lot of moving parts there, right? So
yeah, there are.
When you have so much luck on the tap and go score, there's also the principle of, like, are you pushing your luck? Because sooner or later, someone
run out,
reads it, or you do something wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think to cement the victory, and this is Charlie Morgan saying this, so I'm not picking on anyone, Henry Pollock had to commit about 5 illegalities before he could turn Joe McCarthy around to pilfer him. And I just think that for every one of those kind of wins or losses that Leinster has had, very few losses, they have had a lot of wins in which they needed to do those kind of funky ruck stuff. And so I think it just comes down to that wasn't their day, that Saints started out so gangbusters that the rest of the match, it was just catch up. And the catch up is so exhausting because you make one mistake, or like you say, you think we'll play the odds, go to the corner or tap and go. And then you go back later and say, we could have drawn it. And just to be clear, all that would have happened was it would have been a draw, and then they would have gone to that extra time. And I suppose
that's it.
Home teams,
they would have kept going for another.
That home teams always think that they'll win that. I mean, in the end, if you're the away team, you think, you want to win it in the normal time.
Would that have been? It wouldn't have been sudden death either. Would that have been 10 minutes each way, or would it have been more than that? Would it have been 15 minutes each way?
Not. My understanding is, and this is just based on the grand final a year ago between Toulouse and Leinster, that it's not sudden death. That you actually play a defined period of time. I think it's 10 and 10.
I think it's 10. I think it's 10 minutes each way, and then if it's drawn at that, then we start talking about kicking competitions and all that sort of stuff as well.
Which would have been very fun.
Which would have been fun. Yeah. The Challenge Cup semi-finals were played as well. Bath 39 beat Edinburgh 24 in the Scotland capital. Lyon 29 beat Racing 15.
Yeah, I watched
Lyon.
I
Bath
watched
taking on Lyon
Bath.
in the Challenge Cup final.
Yeah, I watched Bath. I did not watch Lyon because they are, that average team. But but my reflection on Johan van Kraan's team with Finn Russell at the helm is that it's a deep, deep team. And it just felt like Edinburgh was always going to be, in the end, overstretched, and they ran away with it. I've just read things and looked at Lyon, and it looks to me a different type of win there. But I think, it would have been devastating. It would have been like Leinster losing if Bath had gone down to Edinburgh. I just think that there was that much riding on it for the English team. But what you have is 2 English teams arguably favored in the 2 finals now.
Yeah,
which is kind of weird.
Which is an interesting little subplot, considering, again, talking about Northampton's premiership form this year. It's going to be really interesting. And the subplot within all this is that the Saints are still a long way off playing a premiership semi-final. So
true.
But then how much does this push them? How much does this spur them on? And if they can get there, who would want to play them? It's a little like in Super Rugby right now, where you have the Hurricanes coming on, and you're like, "Ooh, I don't want to play you, Hurricanes. You Canes are looking very scary." And so you look at the form line. You do these form lines throughout the thing. You'd see the Hurricanes just kind of climbing slowly. Saints are the same way right now. They are building very nicely. the Canes form line has gone very green of late. It's a perfect segue to get into Super Rugby round 12, and yeah, the big results I think out of it. To flick through them very quickly, the Blues had a very short-lived stint in the top six with their big win over the Western Force. The Fijian Drua had the score in the 80th minute to beat Queensland 36-33. The Hurricanes were just outstanding in the second half, particularly to topple the Chiefs 35-17. The Brumbies dominated the second half, put the Waratahs away in Canberra, and Moana Pacifica are now in a playoff place for the first time in their existence, with a 75th minute try as well to beat the Highlanders. But the Canes were incredible. Balen Sullivan, 4 second half tries it's a hell of an impact off the bench. 9 carries for 20 odd meters, I think, and through 1 pass, 4 tries.
Yeah, I know. So it's almost like Sullivan was the second half version of Tommy Freeman in the first half.
Yes.
He could not stop scoring. No, you look at the table now, and it looks quite different if you start from the bottom and go up.
It does.
You're looking at some
All of a
players.
sudden, there's 4 New Zealand teams in the 4.
Yeah, you look at Waratahs, who have that game in hand, I think still maybe, but then you have Force and you have Drua at the bottom. And then you have the Highlanders. And it's not altogether clear to me now who the bottom 2 will be. I'm not so sure. I thought maybe it was more clear. Now it's becoming like any one of those 4 teams could take a nosedive.
Yeah, potentially. There wasn't a lot of table movement this week. All that happened was the Force and the Waratahs went down.
That's
to
it.
8th and 9th, and the Blues and Moana went up to 6th and 7th.
But
and
that was little.
Everyone else stayed.
There was that little subtle shift, like a Leinster tap and go, where I thought, "Ooh, Force and Waratahs." I think maybe a month ago, I wasn't really thinking of that. I think Waratahs was still sailing pretty well. Force were battling it out and playing over their heads. Now it seems like the teams are becoming what they are. Like, so whatever the points differential is, I think the Brumbies. That. At the other side, the Brumbies are saying, no, we are in the top 4 for sure, and maybe the top 3.
They are. Well, they are. And I was going to make that point because they're now 6 points clear of Queensland, the Brumbies in 3rd. So, yeah, and they were excellent in the second half to put the Waratahs away. They were – it was that first half, first 40 minutes was a fantastic half of rugby. Like, there was real momentum swings. The Brumbies were out 14-0, I think. It might have been 12-0, and then suddenly the Tars come back and scored twice, and it's 12-all. And the Brumbies had to work hard to find another try just before the break. The Waratahs still would have been wrapped to only be down by 7 at that point. But then the second half, they scored 2 converted tries within about 5 minutes inside the first 10 minutes of the second half. And that's what blew them away in the end. And it was pretty dominant in the end.
So you were there at the grounds watching the election and well as watching the rugby.
Not really watching the election.
So you told me that there was a few things you heard both before, during and also post. So I'm interested in that, and we didn't get the chance to talk all the way through it. But you were talking a little bit about how referees are seeing the maul, and what junctures, what points of that sort of process where you would almost expect for the referee to dive in.
Yeah, and maybe this is, and maybe we can go deeper on this, later in the week. It might be a bit of a sort of chat for another day, a little bit. But there's sort of 3 main areas they're looking at. Is what I've picked up from this conversation. That being, they're always looking at, and you hear them saying access, and that's specifically access for the defending team to the jumper, to the receiver,
for the sack
player. For the sack. Making sure that lifters aren't getting around in front of them. They're specifically looking to see that the hooker, back row, whoever it is at the back, the strip, that's not the stripper. What's the term for it?
The ripper.
The ripper, yeah.
Yeah.
Stripper didn't sound right. Making sure that they're coming through the middle of the ruck and not shearing around to the sides, as often happens. And the other thing they're looking at is when the maul stops, what is the impetus to get going again?
And on stop 1, on the first stop.
Yes, on your first stop. and particularly what they're looking for is ball carrier or blokes in front of him switching shoulders from inside to out. So yeah, there is a bit to get into, and when you start thinking about the way they're talking about it, you realize there is actually a fair bit going on. So yeah, we will.
So well, the reason why I brought that up because I think it's applicable to a lot of these games that came down to close moments. Because in a lot of the games where you decide either because you have to because you're enough behind where you have to go to the corner, almost every team then has a set maul drive play that they hope that they get to 4 to 5 meters and then ignites either phase play or they drive over. And then people are criticizing Leinster right now, but Leinster 4 of their 5 tries came from tap and goes.
Yes,
they went away from the maul because some of the money ball stats right now is that refs are looking at those 3 junctures so closely in both hemispheres that you don't see nearly as many maul tries this year as you do a year ago. That's a fact. You can check up on that, guys.
That's true.
It is definitely where you are risking a lot if you try to go beyond 5 meters and the first stop and the ripper and all that stuff can go wrong on you. So in a way, you understand why Leinster went for that option at the end.
Yeah, they lost confidence in their line out as well. That's the other part of it. They lost, and then further on that, you look at a team like Queensland who has the worst line out in Super Rugby, but in more success terms and more meterage, they're leading the competition.
It is so weird. The red stats in
basically all the best maul from the worst line out.
The red stats don't make any sense.
No,
they have the best success rate on scrums in Super Rugby and the best maul. A horrific line out. They play really tight and they try to play through you, but at the same time they are not really a wonderful dominant carry. It's just very weird. And so I just and I'm not being negative, guys, in Australia. I'm just saying that there are some anomalies in the Queensland statistical database.
They definitely are. To wrap up the weekend post-mortem, we'll head to Japan, where we can tell you that the top 6 is looking awfully set now after games in the penultimate round basically went to script. Toshiba, Panasonic, and Kubota separated by just 2 points at the top, and the final round is basically going to be a showdown to determine the top 2. The other end of the table, Honda Heat and Ariasua consign to the relegation games. Toyota for Blitz and Mitsubishi basically need to win next week in the final round to avoid that final relegation place. In Major League Rugby, the Utah Warriors went top of the Western Conference with a 38-31 win over San Diego on Thursday. That's not on that graphic that we're looking at. Seattle and RFC LA drew 26 all on Saturday, and there's still 4 games to come local time on Sunday. RFC LA feel like they're playing with no luck at all at the moment. They're getting results, but they must have a lot of losing bonus points this year.
Yeah, no, it's true. They're puzzled, but so is Seattle right now. It's hard to get my mind around what's happening there.
Seattle have dropped off a cliff. I can't work out what's going on there. They're not winning enough games is what's going on, I suppose.
Our friend is not playing there right now, I think.
There you go. There you go.
But I will say this: Utah is the team that year on year to me is really interesting right now. Like they seem to be really muscling up and playing good rugby.
Yeah.
So watch them.
Yeah, it's San Diego continuing this up and down existence that they've had all year. I think that is us done, mate, for the post-mortem, the weekend post-mortem. We remain in the socials in our usual places, but please do tell us what you think by finding and following the 8-9 Combo on Twitter, on YouTube, and on Blue Sky as well. You can have your say on the 8-9 YouTube channel here. You can have your say on Spotify as well, and share us, review us, all of that sort of stuff, as we've been saying. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed in a rugby podcast. I'm Brett McKay, he's Harry Jones, and we will be back in your ears in just a few days' time with another great rugby chat with Hugh Griffin, all the way from Wales.
Awesome. Come play with us. Woo!